Okay, let's talk about something that seems super straightforward, but is actually, a huge puzzle. It's all about the incredible and almost always unpaid work that volunteers do in our communities. Think about it for a second. Every single year, volunteers are putting in millions of hours of essential work. We're talking about the people who run our food banks, who provide comfort in hospices. I mean, these are the services that hold our communities together.
So that leads to a pretty big question, right? If this work is so critical, so valuable, why on earth aren't we paying them for it? It just feels like basic fairness, doesn't it? Well, you might be surprised. The answer is way more complex than it looks.
To really get this, we've got to look beyond that initial feeling of fairness and dive into the hidden economics of how charities actually work. And what you find there, it's a real paradox.
And this is the core of it, what we're calling the efficiency paradox. Get this, the very thing that feels so unfair, the unpaid labor, is the exact reason these charities can even exist and do their work. It's wild, right? It's the engine that makes the whole thing run. So you're probably thinking, okay, just pay them. It seems like the obvious solution. But there's a huge hidden catch, and trying to fix it this way could actually blow the whole system up.
Okay, let's look at the numbers side by side. The charity model, well, its labor cost is basically zero because, volunteers. So budgets are lean and the services are super affordable. Now, what if the government did it? You've got full salaries, benefits, the whole 9 yards. That means way higher costs and, you guessed it, much lower affordability for the exact same service.
And this is what experts call the substitution trap. The cost difference is just staggering. If the government had to step in and pay people to do everything volunteers currently do, the cost for taxpayers would go through the roof. And that amazing cost-effective advantage that charities have? Poof, gone. So if we can't pay them directly, how does the system even try to deal with this? Well, it's actually pretty clever, in a roundabout way. There's a sort of shadow payment happening. See, instead of giving cash to the volunteer, the government gives tax breaks to the charity itself. It's basically an indirect payment to keep the lights on. Okay, so paying volunteers is a no-go. It would bankrupt the whole sector. And the current system of tax breaks is, well, it's not perfect. So what do? We need a better way, a smarter way, a hybrid approach that's about more than just a paycheck. And that brings us to a really interesting idea, a 3-part hybrid partnership. It breaks down like this. 1. Give volunteers better benefits. 2. Formally recognize the value they create in our tax system. And 3. Get smart about funding the most critical jobs. Let's dig into each of these.
So step 1 is all about getting creative with tax policy. The big idea is to find ways to give volunteers real, meaningful rewards that don't absolutely crush the charity's budget like a full salary would.
This is where in-kind benefits become a total game changer. Check this out. If we tweak the tax rules, a charity can give a volunteer, say, a $100 transport pass. That costs the charity exactly $100. But if they wanted to give that volunteer $100 in their pocket after taxes, they'd have to pay them something like $140. See, it's just a way more efficient way to give them something valuable. All right, step 2. This one is less about money and more about a huge shift in how we think about this. We have to stop looking at tax breaks for charities as some kind of loophole. We need to see them for what they actually are. And here's the key idea. The government is basically outsourcing all this community work to charities. So when you look at it that way, a tax exemption isn't a handout, it's a payment. It's the government paying the charity for taking on a massive workforce that it couldn't possibly afford on its own. And finally, step 3 is about being realistic. Look, volunteering is amazing, but it has limits. We just can't expect unpaid volunteers to handle some of the most skilled, most stressful, most essential jobs indefinitely. That's a recipe for burnout, and eventually, the whole service just falls apart.
So where should we focus this strategic funding? Hospice care is a perfect example. Think of the incredible pressure hospice volunteers take off our public hospitals. It actually makes perfect financial sense for the government to step in and directly pay the wages for those specific roles inside the charity. That way the service stays strong and the government doesn't have to take on the whole, much more expensive operation.
So when you put all these pieces together, what are we really talking about? It's about building a whole new social contract, a new deal, really, one that values people's contribution in creative ways, not just their compensation. So here's the bottom line. We absolutely can build a smarter system. It's about rewarding volunteers with benefits that are actually valuable and tax smart,
It's about changing how we think about tax policy, seeing it as a formal payment, and it's about being strategic and funding those critical roles we just can't afford to lose.
And that really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. This isn't just about spreadsheets and economics, right? It's about what we as a society decide is truly valuable. How do we create a system that genuinely honors all the ways people contribute, instead of just focusing on a paycheck?